The flour barrel scraped empty just as Olivia Zimmerman needed it most. Her bakery counter lined with orders she could no longer fill, and the dusty streets of Ventura, California, offered precious few solutions in the autumn of 1883. She stood in the back room of her small establishment, hands white with the last remnants of flour dust, staring at the wooden barrel that had sustained her business for the past 3 months. Her late husband Robert had been gone nearly a year now, taken by pneumonia during the previous winter, leaving her alone at 24 with a bakery to run and bills that never stopped coming. The gold wedding band still circled her finger, though some days it felt heavier than others. Mrs. Zimmerman. The voice belonged to Margaret Patterson, one of her regular customers, calling from the front of the shop. "Do you have those cinnamon rolls ready?" Olivia wiped her hands on her apron and stepped through the curtain that separated the workspace from the storefront. Margaret stood there with her 2 young daughters, all 3 dressed in their Sunday best despite it being Thursday. Behind them, the main street of Ventura stretched out in the midday sun, horses tied to hitching posts and wagons rolling past on their way to somewhere more important. "I am so sorry, Margaret. I have run out of flour. I sent word to the general store yesterday, but Mr. Henderson says his shipment will not arrive for another 2 weeks. Olivia kept her voice steady, professional, even as worry gnawed at her insides. 2 weeks without baking meant 2 weeks without income, and her landlord would not care about supply problems when rent came due. Margaret's face fell. "Oh dear. Those rolls were for the church social on Saturday. I promised to bring something special. I know, and I truly apologize." Olivia reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small cloth-wrapped package. "I have these butter cookies from yesterday. Please, take them with my compliments. It is not much, but perhaps they will help." Margaret hesitated, then accepted the package with a grateful smile. "You are too kind, dear. I do hope your flour arrives soon. The whole town depends on your baking." After Margaret and her daughters left, Olivia returned to the back room and sank onto a wooden stool. The empty flour barrel seemed to mock her. She had perhaps $3 in her cash box, enough for basic provisions but nowhere near sufficient to purchase flour from one of the traveling merchants who sometimes passed through town. Those men charged double what the general store did, taking advantage of desperate situations exactly like hers. She thought about writing to her brother in San Francisco, but Thomas had his own family to support and had already helped her through the worst of her grief. She could not keep asking him for assistance. Robert would have wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet, to prove she could manage the bakery they had started together. The bell above the front door chimed. Olivia stood quickly, smoothing her skirts and tucking a strand of dark hair back into place. When she emerged from the back room, a tall man stood examining the empty display case. He wore dusty trail clothes, leather chaps over worn denim, and a hat that had seen better days. A saddle bag hung over his shoulder. "I apologize, but I am closed for the moment," Olivia said. The man turned, and she found herself looking into the most remarkable hazel eyes she had ever seen. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most. "That is a shame," he said, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "I rode past earlier, and the smell coming from this place nearly pulled me right off my horse. I have been dreaming about fresh bread for the last 50 miles. I wish I could help you truly, but I have run out of flour." He frowned slightly, glancing at the empty display case again. "That explains the sad state of things in here. When do you expect more?" 2 weeks, according to Mr. Henderson at the general store." 2 weeks? He let out a low whistle. "That is a long time for a bakery to be closed." Yes, well, such is life sometimes. Olivia tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. Is there anything else I can help you with? The man studied her for a long moment, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks under his gaze. It was not improper exactly, but it was direct in a way that made her acutely aware of how she must look after a morning of fruitless work. Flour dust in her hair and exhaustion probably written across her face. "My name is Samuel Tucker," he said finally. "I am passing through on my way up to Santa Barbara, but I plan to stay in Ventura a few days. Let my horse rest, do the same myself. Welcome to our town, Mr. Tucker. I am sorry your stay begins with such disappointment." "Oh, I would not say I am disappointed." Something in his tone made her look up sharply, but his expression remained neutral. "I was actually hoping to have a conversation with you, Mrs. Zimmerman. May I?" She hesitated. Propriety suggested she should not entertain a strange man alone in her shop, but the door remained open to the street, and it was broad daylight. Besides, something about Samuel Tucker struck her as fundamentally decent despite his rough appearance. "Very well. Though I cannot imagine what we would have to discuss." He set his saddle bag down on the counter with a heavy thunk that suggested it contained something substantial. "I could not help but overhear your conversation with that lady. You need flour, and as it happens, I might be able to help with that." Olivia's heart jumped. "You have flour?" "Not on me exactly, but I know where to get some. I just came from the Harrison Ranch about 20 miles south. They grow their own wheat and mill it themselves. Probably have more flour than they know what to do with." "I know the Harrison place," Olivia said slowly. "But old Mr. Harrison does not sell to townspeople. He only trades with other ranchers." "That is true enough under normal circumstances," Samuel agreed. "But he owes me a favor. A pretty big one, actually. I helped him round up some cattle that got loose last month, saved him from losing half his herd. He said if I ever needed anything, I should ask." Hope fluttered in Olivia's chest, but she forced herself to remain cautious. "Why would you help me, Mr. Tucker? You do not even know me." He smiled then, and it transformed his entire face from merely handsome to something that made her stomach do an unexpected flip. "Let us just say I have a weakness for fresh baked goods and a strong dislike for seeing hardworking people get beaten down by circumstances. If I can help you get that flour, you could bake again, yes?" "Yes, of course." "Then it seems like a situation where everybody wins. You get your flour, I get to taste whatever it is that smelled so good this morning, and Mr. Harrison gets to repay his debt to me." It sounded too good to be true, which usually meant it was. "What would you want in return?" "Just some baked goods. Nothing more, I promise." He held up his hands as if to show he had no hidden agenda. "I will ride out to the Harrison Ranch tomorrow morning, speak with old Thomas, and hopefully be back by evening with enough flour to hold you over until the general store gets its shipment." "Thomas? You mean Mr. Harrison's first name? We got pretty friendly during that cattle situation." "He is a good man, just set in his ways." Olivia found herself wanting to believe him. More than that, she needed to believe him. 2 weeks without income would destroy everything she had worked so hard to maintain. But accepting help from a stranger felt dangerous in ways she could not quite articulate. "I do not have much money to spare," she said quietly. "If Mr. Harrison wants payment for the flour, I can only offer a few dollars." "I will handle any costs," Samuel said. "Consider it an investment in the best breakfast I hope to have in months." "That seems hardly fair to you." "Let me worry about what is fair to me." He picked up his saddle bag again. "I am staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street. I will head out to the Harrison Ranch at first light. If all goes well, you should have flour by tomorrow evening." He tipped his hat to her and headed for the door. Olivia found herself following him, questions bubbling up that she had not had time to ask. He paused on the threshold, looking back at her with those remarkable eyes. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment. "My mother was widowed when I was 16. She tried to keep our family farm going, but people were not always kind about it. Some folks see a woman alone and think she is easy to take advantage of. Others just do not care enough to help when help is needed. I learned then that sometimes the smallest gesture can make all the difference." He smiled again, softer this time. "See you tomorrow, Mrs. Zimmerman." She watched him walk down the street until he disappeared around the corner, her hand pressed against the doorframe. The entire encounter had lasted perhaps 10 minutes, but it left her feeling oddly shaken. Samuel Tucker had ridden into her life like a dust devil, unexpected and impossible to ignore. That night, Olivia barely slept. She kept thinking about the stranger with the kind eyes and wondering if he would actually follow through on his promise. Men said many things, especially to women they perceived as vulnerable. Robert had been the exception to that rule, a man whose words matched his actions without fail. But Robert was gone, and she had learned not to expect too much from anyone else. The next morning she opened the bakery even though she had nothing to sell, simply because staying home felt wrong. She swept the floors, wiped down the counters, and tried not to watch the clock too obsessively. Samuel had said evening. That could mean anything from 4 in the afternoon to well past dark. Around noon, Margaret Patterson stopped by again, this time without her daughters. "I heard something interesting at the post office this morning." "Oh," Olivia continued, wiping down an already clean counter. "Apparently, a cowboy came into town yesterday asking questions about you. Well, not about you specifically, but about the bakery and who ran it." Olivia felt heat creep up her neck. "His name is Samuel Tucker. He stopped by yesterday." And Margaret leaned forward conspiratorially. "What did he want?" "He said he might be able to help me get flour from the Harrison ranch." Margaret's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "The Harrison ranch. Thomas Harrison does not sell to anyone outside his circle. Mr. Tucker claims to know him personally. He rode out there this morning. How convenient that a handsome stranger shows up right when you need help." Margaret's tone was teasing but not unkind. "Perhaps God has decided to answer your prayers in an unexpected way." "It is just about flour," Olivia protested, but her friend's knowing smile suggested she was not convinced. After Margaret left, Olivia tried to stay busy, but her mind kept drifting to Samuel Tucker. She knew almost nothing about him beyond his name and his Texas drawl. He could be anyone, carrying any kind of past. The smart thing would be to maintain a professional distance, accept the flour if he managed to obtain it, pay him fairly for his trouble, and send him on his way to Santa Barbara. But when she closed her eyes, she saw his smile and the genuine warmth in his expression when he had spoken about his mother. That had not felt like manipulation. It had felt like truth. The sun was setting when she heard the sound of a wagon outside. She rushed to the window and saw Samuel Tucker climbing down from a buckboard loaded with several large sacks. Her heart began to pound. She opened the door before he could knock. "You actually did it. Did you doubt me?" He grinned, and again she felt that strange flutter in her stomach. "Mr. Harrison sends his regards. He was happy to help once I explained the situation. These are 50-pound sacks and there are 6 of them. Should keep you going for a while." 6 sacks. Olivia put her hand to her mouth. "That is far too much. I cannot possibly accept all that." "Already paid for and loaded. Where would you like them?" She wanted to argue further but could not deny the relief flooding through her. "The back room, if you do not mind." Samuel began hauling the sacks inside, his muscles flexing under his shirt with the effort. Olivia tried not to notice the way he moved with easy confidence. comfortable in his own skin in a way she had never quite managed. Each sack was heavy enough that she would have struggled to move them herself, but he carried them as if they weighed nothing. When the last sack was stacked in her storage room, Samuel wiped his brow with his sleeve. That should do it. Mr. Harrison also sent along some eggs and butter, said his wife insisted. I do not know what to say. Olivia felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of this man. Thank you seems insufficient. Thank you is plenty. He paused, looking around the back room with its ovens and work tables. This is a nice setup you have here. You built this business yourself. My husband and I started it together 3 years ago. He did the accounts, I did the baking. After he passed, I had to learn both sides. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. She twisted her wedding ring without thinking, an old habit. Robert was a good man. I am sure he was. Samuel's voice was gentle. And I am sure he would be proud of how you have kept things going. The kindness in his words nearly undid her composure completely. She turned away, busying herself with examining the flour sacks. What do I owe you for all this? I told you already, just some baked goods when you get a chance. Mr. Tucker, this is far too much flour to trade for a few pastries. Then make it more than a few pastries. He moved toward the door. I am in town for at least a few more days. Maybe a week if I like it here enough. I will stop by when I get hungry and you can feed me whatever seems fair. No rush, no pressure. You are an unusual man, Mr. Tucker, Samuel please, and I will take that as a compliment. He tipped his hat again. Good evening, Mrs. Zimmerman. Olivia. The name slipped out before she could stop it. You can call me Olivia. His smile widened. Good evening, Olivia. After he left, she stood in the back room surrounded by more flour than she had seen in months and tried to understand what had just happened. A stranger had ridden into town and solved her biggest problem without asking for anything beyond some baked goods in return. It defied logic. It defied her experience of how the world worked, especially for widowed women trying to make their own way. She thought about what Margaret had said, about prayers being answered in unexpected ways. Olivia had not been to church much since Robert died, too angry at God for taking the one person who had truly understood her. But standing there in the golden evening light, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite hope, but perhaps the possibility of hope. That night, she stayed up late planning what she would bake first. Bread, obviously, since that was her staple. But also the cinnamon rolls Margaret had wanted, and maybe some berry tarts if she could get fruit from the market. And something special for Samuel Tucker, though she was not quite ready to examine too closely why she wanted to impress him. The next morning, Olivia woke before dawn, energized in a way she had not been in months. She lit the ovens, mixed her first batch of dough, and lost herself in the familiar rhythm of baking. The smell of fresh bread filled the shop by the time the sun rose, and soon customers began appearing at her door. News traveled fast in a town the size of Ventura. Everyone had heard about the mysterious cowboy who had obtained flour from the notoriously difficult Thomas Harrison, and everyone wanted to know the details. Olivia found herself telling the story over and over until it began to feel almost unreal, like something that had happened to someone else. He must be sweet on you, said elderly Mrs. Cooper, who had known Olivia since she was a child. Men do not go to that kind of trouble otherwise. He is just passing through town, Olivia replied, wrapping a loaf of wheat bread. He will be gone in a few days. We shall see about that. Mrs. Cooper's knowing look reminded Olivia uncomfortably of Margaret's expression the day before. Samuel did not come by that day, or the next. Olivia told herself she was relieved. The less complicated her life remained, the better. She had enough to worry about without adding a handsome cowboy to the mix. But she could not quite stop herself from glancing toward the door whenever the bell chimed, or from feeling a small stab of disappointment when it was always someone else. On the third day after he had delivered the flour, Samuel finally appeared just as Olivia was about to close for the evening. She had been wiping down the counters, tired but satisfied after a long day of successful baking. When the bell chimed and she looked up to see him standing there, her heart did that annoying flutter thing again. "Hello, Olivia." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "I hope I am not too late. We are technically closed, but for you I can make an exception." She gestured to the display case, which was nearly empty after a busy day. "I am afraid the selection is limited at this hour." "I am not picky." He approached the counter, and she caught the scent of leather and sage and something indefinably masculine. "Whatever you recommend." She had saved back a dozen cinnamon rolls specifically for him, along with half a loaf of her best sourdough and a berry tart that had turned out particularly well. She packed everything into a basket and set it on the counter between them. "This is for you, with my gratitude." Samuel looked at the overflowing basket and then back at her. "This is far too much. You brought me 6 sacks of flour. This barely begins to repay that kindness." "I did not do it for repayment. I know." She met his eyes steadily. "But I did it anyway. Please accept it." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you. I will likely eat all of this tonight and regret it in the morning." "Somehow I doubt that." She found herself smiling. "How long are you planning to stay in Ventura?" "I have been asking myself the same question. Originally, I thought maybe a week, but I am finding reasons to linger." His gaze held hers, and the air between them felt suddenly charged with something unspoken. Olivia looked away first, fussing with her apron. "What business do you have in Santa Barbara?" "Ranch work, mostly." "I have a job offer there, but it does not start until the 1st of the month. Gives me some time to take my time getting there." "What kind of ranch work?" "Cattle, horses, general maintenance." "I have been working ranches since I was 15. It is all I really know how to do." He leaned against the counter, relaxed in a way that suggested he was in no hurry to leave. "What about you? Have you always been a baker?" "My mother taught me." She learned from her mother. "It is a family tradition, I suppose." Olivia found herself relaxing too, drawn into conversation despite her better judgment. "I used to dream about opening a bakery in San Francisco, somewhere big and exciting. But then I met Robert and we decided to start small here in Ventura. Build something together." "Do you still think about San Francisco?" "Sometimes. But this is my home now. These people are my customers, my neighbors. I could not just leave them without a bakery." She laughed softly. "That probably sounds silly to someone like you who travels from place to place." "It does not sound silly at all. It sounds like loyalty, and that is rarer than you might think." Samuel picked up the basket. "Would you like to take a walk with me? It is a nice evening, and I promise to be a perfect gentleman." Every sensible part of Olivia's brain screamed that this was a bad idea. She barely knew this man. People would talk. She was still in mourning, even if it had been nearly a year. But the loneliness that had been her constant companion since Robert's death suddenly felt unbearable. And Samuel Tucker was looking at her with such genuine interest that she could not bring herself to say no. "Let me lock up first." They walked down Main Street as the sky turned purple and gold with sunset. Ventura was quiet at this hour, most people home for dinner. Samuel carried his basket of baked goods and told her stories about the places he had been, the people he had met. He had worked ranches all over California and Nevada, drifting from job to job with no particular destination in mind. "Does it ever get lonely?" Olivia asked. "Never staying in one place." "More than I like to admit," Samuel said. "But I convinced myself a long time ago that I was not built for settling down. My father left when I was young, and I guess I always figured I had too much of him in me to be reliable. That seems like a sad way to think about yourself. Maybe. But it kept me from disappointing anyone by pretending to be something I am not." They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land and distant mountains. Olivia stopped walking, suddenly aware of how far they had come and how dark it was getting. "I should head back," she said. "Of course." Samuel turned with her, falling into step as they retraced their path. "Thank you for the company and the food. Thank you for walking with me." She hesitated, then added, "I have enjoyed talking with you, Samuel, more than I expected to." "Was your expectation that you would not enjoy it at all?" His tone was teasing. "I did not know what to expect. You are very different from anyone I have known before, different good or different bad." She considered the question seriously. "Different in a way that makes me want to know more." They had reached the bakery again. Olivia retrieved her key from her pocket, acutely aware of Samuel standing close behind her. When she turned after unlocking the door, they were nearly face to face. "I would like to see you again," Samuel said quietly, "if that would be acceptable to you." Her pulse was racing. "I think that would be acceptable. Tomorrow evening, maybe we could have dinner together." "That sounds lovely," he smiled, and in the dim light from the street lamp his face looked almost boyish despite the weathering. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Samuel." She watched him walk away before going inside, her mind whirling. This was dangerous territory. She had no business developing feelings for a drifter who would be gone in a matter of days. But her heart seemed to have missed that particular memo, because it was beating far too fast and she could not stop smiling. The next day passed in a blur of baking and customer service, but Olivia's thoughts kept drifting to the evening ahead. She closed the bakery an hour early and went upstairs to the small apartment above the shop where she lived. It had been Robert's idea to live where they worked, to save money and time. Now, it sometimes felt like a prison, everything around her holding memories of what she had lost. She changed into her best dress, a deep blue cotton with lace at the collar that Robert had always said brought out her eyes. Then she immediately felt guilty for wearing it and almost changed back. But that seemed ridiculous, so she kept it on and focused on fixing her hair instead. Samuel arrived exactly when he said he would, dressed in clean clothes that while still worn showed he had made an effort. He had shaved too, revealing the strong lines of his jaw. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You look quite nice yourself." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked to the small restaurant on 5th Street, one of only 3 in Ventura. The owner, Giuseppe Morty, raised his eyebrows when he saw them together but said nothing beyond a warm greeting. Over dinner, Samuel asked her about her life, really asked, listening carefully to her answers. He wanted to know about her childhood, her parents, what she liked to read, whether she preferred summer or winter. It had been so long since anyone had been genuinely interested in her as a person rather than as the widow who ran the bakery. "What was Robert like?" Samuel asked eventually. The question surprised her. "Why do you want to know?" "Because he was important to you." "That makes him worth knowing about." Olivia set down her fork, considering how to answer. "He was steady, reliable. He always did exactly what he said he would do. When we met, I was 19 and he was 21, and he pursued me with this quiet determination that was impossible to resist. My parents approved of him. Everyone approved of him." She paused. "I loved him very much." "But," Samuel prompted gently. "But what?" There was a but in your voice. She had not realized she was so transparent. "But sometimes I wonder if I loved him or the idea of him. The security he represented, the future we could build together. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human." Samuel reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The touch sent electricity up her arm. "We are all trying to figure out what we want and why we want it. There is no shame in that." His understanding threatened to undo something inside her. She pulled her hand back gently, not wanting to, but knowing she had to maintain some boundaries. "What about you? Has there ever been anyone serious in your life?" A few almosts. "Women who wanted me to stay and build a life when all I wanted was to keep moving. I always ended things before they could get too serious. Seemed kinder that way." "Why did you want to keep moving?" He looked out the window at the darkening street. "Fear, mostly. Fear that if I stopped, I would have to face who I really was instead of who I was pretending to be. As long as I kept drifting, I could tell myself I was free rather than lost. And now I am starting to think maybe I had it backwards all along." He looked back at her, his expression serious. "Being here with you, it does not feel like losing freedom. It feels like finding something I did not know I was looking for." The words hung between them, weighted with possibility and danger. Olivia knew she should retreat, protect herself. But sitting there in the warm glow of the restaurant, she could not make herself want to. They walked slowly back to the bakery, neither seeming eager to end the evening. When they reached her door, Samuel stopped but did not move to leave. "I need to be honest with you about something," he said. "That job in Santa Barbara, the one I mentioned, I turned it down this morning." Olivia's breath caught. "Why?" "Because the idea of leaving Ventura does not sit right with me anymore. There is something here worth staying for." His eyes met hers. "Someone, I should say." "Samuel, you barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are strong and kind and you make the best cinnamon rolls I have ever tasted. I know you loved your husband and you are loyal to your customers and you twist your wedding ring when you are nervous. I know that when you smile, really smile, it is like the sun coming out." He took a step closer. "I know I want to stay and learn everything else. What if you get restless? What if staying feels like a trap after a few weeks or months? What if it does not?" He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I am not asking for forever right now, Olivia. I am just asking for a chance." She should say no. The smart, sensible thing was to thank him for his help and send him on his way before either of them got hurt. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, all right, stay, give it a chance, see what happens." His smile was brilliant. "You will not regret this." "I hope not," she said, but she was smiling too. Samuel left shortly after, and Olivia went upstairs to her apartment feeling like she was floating. She removed her dress carefully, hanging it in the wardrobe next to Robert's old shirts that she had never been able to bring herself to give away. Looking at them now, she felt a pang of guilt mixed with something else, something that might have been permission. "I think you would like him," she whispered to the empty room. "I think you would understand." There was no answer, of course. But the oppressive weight of grief that usually filled the apartment felt lighter somehow. Over the next few weeks, Samuel became a fixture in Olivia's life. He found work at her ranch just outside of town, doing the same kind of cattle work he had always done. In the evenings, he would come by the bakery, often helping her close up shop before they walked or had dinner together. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, content to let their relationship develop at its own pace. The town noticed, naturally. Margaret and Mrs. Cooper were delighted, seeing romance where perhaps there was still only friendship tentatively becoming something more. Others were less approving, thinking it too soon after Robert's death, or worrying that Samuel would break her heart and leave her worse off than before. "I heard Samuel Tucker has a reputation," said Martha Henderson one morning while buying bread. Her husband owned the general store, and she considered herself the town's unofficial moral guardian. They say he has left broken hearts in every town from here to Nevada. Olivia kept her voice carefully neutral. People say a lot of things, Mrs. Henderson. I am just concerned for you, dear. As a widow, you are vulnerable. Men like him can sense that. I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself. Martha sniffed disapprovingly, but took her bread and left. Olivia tried not to let the words bother her, but doubt had a way of creeping in during quiet moments. What did she really know about Samuel Tucker? Only what he had told her, and people could lie. People could seem one way while being completely different underneath. That evening, she asked him about it directly. They were sitting on the bench outside her bakery, watching the stars come out. Martha Henderson says you have a reputation. Samuel did not seem surprised by the question. What kind of reputation? The kind where you break hearts and move on without looking back. He was quiet for a moment. I have ended relationships, yes. I have said goodbye to women I cared about because I was not ready to give them what they deserved. If that makes me a heartbreaker, then I guess I am guilty. He turned to look at her. But I never lied to anyone, and I never made promises I could not keep. That has to count for something. Why should I believe things will be different with me? Because I am different with you. I do not know how else to explain it. Every other time I felt like I was playing a role, trying to be who they wanted me to be. With you, I just am who I am, and somehow that is enough. Olivia wanted to believe him. More than that, she was starting to need to believe him. The walls she had built around her heart after Robert died were crumbling, and Samuel was walking through the ruins like he belonged there. I am scared, she admitted. I am scared of caring too much and getting hurt again. I am scared too. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I am terrified, actually. But being scared is better than being numb, and I have been numb for a long time. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. When did this happen? When did we go from strangers to this? I think it happened the moment I walked into your bakery and saw you standing there covered in flour dust, looking fierce and fragile at the same time. I was done for right then. That is very romantic, but I am fairly certain I looked a complete mess that day. You looked perfect. They sat there as the sky grew darker and the street emptied, just holding hands and existing together in a moment of quiet peace. Olivia felt something inside her chest unfurl, some tightly wound spring of grief and loneliness finally relaxing. Samuel. Yes. I think I might be falling in love with you. She felt him tense, then relax. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I know I am falling in love with you. I am pretty sure I started falling that first day. She lifted her head to look at him, and what she saw in his face made her brave. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper when he responded with gratifying enthusiasm. It had been so long since she had been kissed, and never quite like this, with this sense of rightness and discovery all mixed together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. That was worth waiting for. It was it not? She was grinning like a fool and did not care. Would you like to come upstairs? For coffee, I mean, just coffee. I would love that. Her apartment was small and still full of Robert's things, but Samuel did not seem bothered. He looked around with genuine interest while she made coffee on the small stove. You have a lot of books, he observed, examining the shelf in the corner. Reading is how I travel, since I cannot seem to do it any other way. Where would you go if you could go anywhere? She handed him a cup and settled into one of the 2 chairs by the window. I used to dream about Paris, all those grand buildings and museums. But honestly, I would settle for San Francisco at this point. I have not been anywhere beyond Ventura in 3 years. We should change that. Change what? the part where you have not been anywhere. He sat in the other chair, looking surprisingly at home in her small space. We could take a trip. Nothing too far, maybe just up the coast. You could close the bakery for a few days. I could borrow a wagon. It would be an adventure. The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. I could not possibly close the bakery. People depend on me. People can survive without fresh bread for a few days. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it was responsible or expected? She had to think about that. I cannot remember. Then we should definitely do it. I cannot just run off with you. What would people say? Do you care what people say? The question stopped her. Did she care? She had spent so much of her life worrying about propriety and appearances, about being the kind of woman her parents would be proud of. But what had all that caution gotten her? A safe, small life that sometimes felt like it was slowly suffocating her. Ask me again in a few days, she said finally. Let me think about it. Fair enough. Samuel did not push, which she appreciated. Tell me about your family. You mentioned a brother in San Francisco. They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Olivia learned that Samuel's mother had died 2 years ago, that he had a sister somewhere in Oregon he had not seen in 5 years, that his favorite color was green because it reminded him of spring. He learned that Olivia sang when she baked, that she had wanted children but Robert had kept saying they should wait until the business was more established, that she was terrified of horses after being thrown from one as a child. When Samuel finally left, promising to come by the next day, Olivia felt like she knew him in a way she had never quite known Robert. They had shared their surfaces with each other, their hopes and histories. It felt both vulnerable and exhilarating. The next morning, she woke with renewed purpose. She had been existing for too long, going through motions without really living. Samuel made her want to be brave again, to take risks and see where they led. She was mixing dough when Margaret came in, earlier than usual. I need to tell you something, and you are not going to like it. Olivia's hand stilled. What is it? John heard some men talking at the saloon last night. Apparently, Samuel got into an altercation with someone. It sounded bad, Olivia. There was talk of violence. Cold dread settled in Olivia's stomach. What kind of altercation? I do not have all the details, but John said Samuel was defending someone, maybe a woman. It turned physical. Is he all right? I do not know. John left before it was over. Margaret looked worried. I thought you should know, in case it changes how you feel about him. After Margaret left, Olivia could not concentrate on her work. She kept imagining Samuel hurt somewhere or worse. She was about to close up and go looking for him when the bell chimed and he walked in, looking tired but unhurt. I heard about last night, she said immediately. Are you okay? Samuel's expression turned rueful. News travels fast. I am fine. Little bruised, but fine. What happened? He sighed and approached the counter. There was a woman at the saloon, one of the girls who works there. Some drunk cowboy was getting rough with her, would not take no for an answer. I stepped in, and he took a swing at me. I defended myself. It was over quickly, but of course everyone in the saloon saw the whole thing. Now it will be all over town. He looked at her carefully. Are you angry? Why would I be angry? Because it is exactly the kind of thing that will make people talk. That will reflect badly on you if we are together. Olivia came around the counter and took his hand, examining his bruised knuckles. Did you protect that woman? Yes. Then I am not angry. I am proud of you. The relief on his face was palpable. You are a remarkable woman, Olivia Zimmerman. I am starting to figure that out. She pulled him into the back room and made him sit while she fetched water and a clean cloth to tend to his hands. The cuts were not deep, but they would be sore for a few days. As she worked, Samuel watched her with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. I have been thinking about your invitation, she said quietly. The trip up the coast, and I would like to go, soon before I lose my nerve. His smile was brilliant despite his split lip. When? Next week. I could ask Margaret to watch the bakery for a few days. She knows how to run things. Next week sounds perfect. That afternoon, Olivia asked Margaret, who agreed immediately despite her concerns about Samuel. "You need this," Margaret said firmly. "You need to remember how to live." Planning the trip gave Olivia something to look forward to in a way she had not experienced in ages. Samuel arranged to borrow a wagon and supplies from the ranch where he worked. They would head north to Santa Barbara, then maybe further to one of the small coastal towns beyond. 3 days there, 3 days back, with a few days to explore in between. The night before they were set to leave, Olivia stood in her apartment surrounded by half-packed bags, feeling nervous and excited and slightly guilty all at once. She picked up the photograph of Robert that sat on her bedside table, studying his serious face. "I will always love you," she whispered. "But I need to live again. I think you would understand that." She carefully removed her wedding ring and placed it in a small box in her dresser drawer. It felt monumental, that simple action. She was not erasing Robert or pretending their marriage had not mattered. But she was making space for something new, and the ring had been holding her back from that. Samuel arrived at dawn with the wagon loaded and ready. Olivia locked up the bakery with only a small pang of anxiety. Margaret had promised to check on things daily, and the town would survive without fresh bread for a week. She was allowed to have this adventure. They headed north on the coastal road, the ocean visible in the distance. The morning was cool but promised to warm up nicely. Samuel drove while Olivia sat beside him, a blanket across her lap against the chill. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little. Excited mostly." "Good. Me too." They talked as they traveled, pointing out interesting sights and sharing random thoughts. Samuel told her about the different ranches he had worked and what made each unique. Olivia told him about her parents, who had died within months of each other when she was 21, leaving her alone until she met Robert. They stopped for lunch in a grove of trees overlooking the ocean. Samuel had packed bread and cheese and apples, simple fare that tasted incredible eaten outdoors. Olivia could not remember the last time she had felt so free. "Thank you for this," she said. "I did not realize how much I needed it. Sometimes we do not know what we need until someone shows us." Samuel reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "You are beautiful when you smile like that." "Like what?" "Like you do not have a care in the world." She kissed him then, sweet and brief but full of promise. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I love you. I know it is fast and probably too soon to say it, but I do. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you sing when you think no one is listening. I love how you care about your customers and how you talk to your bread dough like it is listening. I love everything about you." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I love you too. I have been trying not to, trying to be sensible, but I cannot help it. I love you, Samuel Tucker." They sat there holding each other while the ocean crashed in the distance, and the world felt full of infinite possibility. They reached Santa Barbara late that afternoon and found a small boarding house that rented rooms. Samuel asked for 2 rooms, and Olivia felt both grateful and slightly disappointed. She was not ready for everything that one room would imply, but the thought of Samuel so close yet separate felt wrong somehow. That evening they walked through the town, which was larger and busier than Ventura. There were shops and restaurants and even a theater showing plays. They ate dinner at a restaurant far nicer than anything back home, and Samuel ordered wine that made Olivia's head spin pleasantly. "We could live here," Samuel said suddenly. "If you wanted, start over somewhere no one knows us." Leave Ventura. Why not? You said yourself you used to dream of bigger places. Santa Barbara might not be Paris, but it is a start. The idea was tempting. A fresh beginning, no more well-meaning neighbors gossiping about her and Samuel. But as she thought about it, she realized something. Ventura is my home. Those people who drive you crazy with their gossip and their opinions, they are the same ones who supported me after Robert died. They bought bread even when money was tight and checked in to make sure I was eating. I cannot just abandon them. Samuel nodded slowly. I understand. And honestly, I am glad. It shows your character that you would stay loyal even when leaving would be easier. But what about you? Will you be happy in a small town like Ventura? You are used to moving around, seeing new places. I think I was moving around because I did not have a reason to stay anywhere. Now I do. He took her hand across the table. You are my reason, Olivia. Wherever you are is where I want to be. They spent 2 more days exploring Santa Barbara and the surrounding area. Samuel rented horses despite Olivia's fear, and somehow coaxed her into riding with patient encouragement. They visited the old mission and walked along the beach and talked about everything and nothing. It was the happiest Olivia could remember being since before Robert got sick. On their last night before starting back to Ventura, they sat on the porch of the boarding house watching the stars. Olivia's head rested on Samuel's shoulder, and his arm was around her waist. I do not want this to end, she said quietly. It does not have to end. This is just the beginning. Do you really think we can make this work? Build a life together? I know we can. He shifted to look at her. I want to marry you, Olivia, not right away if you are not ready, but someday. I want to wake up next to you every morning and help you in the bakery and raise children with you and grow old together. I want all of it. Her heart was pounding. That is a lot of wanting. Is it too much? She thought about it honestly. A week ago, the idea of remarrying would have seemed impossible. But Samuel had changed something fundamental inside her. He had reminded her that life was meant to be lived, not just endured. No, she said finally. It is not too much. In fact, it is exactly right. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Olivia felt herself melting into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she knew what she wanted. Stay with me tonight, she whispered. Really stay? Are you sure? I am sure. He stood and offered his hand, and she took it without hesitation. They went to her room and closed the door on the rest of the world. What happened that night was tender and passionate, and everything Olivia had not even known she was missing. Samuel treated her like she was precious, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and desired. Afterward, lying in his arms, Olivia felt a completeness she had thought lost forever. This was different from what she had shared with Robert, not better or worse, but simply different. Both relationships had been built on love, but this one was also built on choice. She was choosing Samuel just as he was choosing her, 2 adults who knew their own minds and hearts. The journey back to Ventura felt both too long and too short. Olivia was eager to get home, to start building their life together properly. But she also wanted to preserve this perfect bubble they had created, where nothing existed except the 2 of them. When they finally rolled back into town a week after leaving, Margaret was there to greet them, looking relieved and slightly knowing. I take it things went well. Olivia could not stop smiling. Better than well. Good. The bakery survived your absence, though I did burn 1 batch of bread. And people have been asking when you would be back. That evening, after Samuel left to return the wagon, and Olivia had unpacked and checked on the bakery, she sat down and wrote a letter to her brother Thomas. She told him about Samuel, about falling in love again, about feeling like she had permission to be happy. She asked for his blessing even though she did not technically need it, because family mattered and Thomas was all she had left. His response came 3 weeks later, expressing surprise but also cautious support. He wanted to meet Samuel to make sure this cowboy was worthy of his sister. They made plans for Thomas and his family to visit in the spring. Meanwhile, life settled into a new rhythm. Samuel continued working at the ranch but spent most evenings and Sundays with Olivia. He helped her in the bakery, learning how to knead dough and shape rolls. He was not particularly talented at baking, but his presence made the work feel less lonely. In November, Samuel officially proposed. He did it simply, without a fancy ring or elaborate planning. They were walking back from church one Sunday morning when he suddenly stopped and knelt right there in the middle of the street. "Olivia Zimmerman, will you marry me?" She laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course I will." He stood and swung her around, both of them grinning like fools. A few passers-by clapped and offered congratulations. It was official now, their relationship recognized and approved by the town. They set the wedding for January, giving them enough time to plan but not so much that the waiting felt endless. Olivia asked Margaret to be her matron of honor, and Samuel asked the ranch foreman, a good man named Joseph, to be his best man. It would be a small ceremony at the church with a reception at the bakery afterward. As the wedding approached, Olivia found herself thinking about Robert less and less, though when she did, it was with fondness rather than pain. He had been her first love, the man who taught her that she was worthy of affection and partnership. Samuel was her second chance, proof that love could find you more than once if you were brave enough to let it. On a cold January morning, Olivia wore a simple cream-colored dress and walked down the aisle of the Ventura church toward Samuel, who stood waiting in his Sunday best. His eyes never left her face, and the love there was so clear that several people in the small congregation wiped away tears. They spoke their vows clearly, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her thoroughly enough that a few people in the back pews laughed. Olivia did not care. She was Mrs. Samuel Tucker now, and it felt absolutely right. The reception was exactly as informal and warm as they had hoped. People brought food to share, and someone produced a fiddle for dancing. Samuel proved to be surprisingly good at dancing, spinning Olivia around the cleared floor of her bakery until she was breathless and laughing. "I did not know you could dance," she said. "I am a man of many hidden talents." He pulled her close, swaying gently to the music. "Are you happy, Mrs. Tucker?" "Happier than I have any right to be. You have every right." He kissed her forehead. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They spent their wedding night in Olivia's apartment, which was now their apartment. Samuel had gradually moved his few possessions in over the past months, and the space that had once been so full of Robert's memory now held pieces of this new life they were building. The next morning, they woke tangled together, and Olivia felt a contentment so profound, it almost frightened her. This was what she had been missing without realizing it, this sense of partnership and intimacy and simple joy in another person's presence. "Good morning, wife," Samuel murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning, husband." They lay there lazily, talking and laughing and making plans. Samuel wanted to save up to expand the bakery, maybe add a second room where they could sell coffee and tea. Olivia liked the idea but wanted to make sure they could manage it financially. They talked about children, how many they wanted and when they should start trying. Samuel was in no rush, content to have Olivia to himself for a while. Over the following months, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Samuel proved to be an attentive husband, always interested in Olivia's day and quick to help with household chores. He was different from Robert in many ways, more spontaneous and playful, but he shared Robert's essential goodness. In March, Thomas visited with his wife and 2 children. He was cautious with Samuel at first, protective of his younger sister. But over the course of a weekend, he saw how Samuel looked at Olivia, how he anticipated her needs and made her laugh, and his reservations melted away. "He is a good man," Thomas said before leaving. "I am glad you found each other." Spring turned to summer and the bakery continued to thrive. Word had spread about the quality of Olivia's goods, and people sometimes came from neighboring towns specifically to buy her bread and pastries. Samuel suggested she raise her prices, but Olivia resisted, not wanting to take advantage of her neighbors. "You are not taking advantage," Samuel argued gently. "You are charging what your work is worth. There is a difference." Eventually, she compromised, raising prices slightly but not as much as Samuel thought she should. It was enough to make a difference in their finances without feeling greedy. In August, Olivia realized her monthly cycle was late. She waited another week to be sure before saying anything to Samuel. When she finally told him, sitting at their small kitchen table after dinner, his face lit up with such joy that she started crying. "We are having a baby," he sounded awed. "We are having a baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I love you so much. You are going to be an amazing mother." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia was sick most mornings and exhausted by afternoon. Samuel took over more of the bakery work, following her detailed instructions to produce bread and rolls that were almost as good as hers. The townspeople were understanding, and many women offered advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. In the spring of 1885, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Robert Samuel Tucker, honoring both the past and the present. Samuel cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the tiny life they had created together. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered. "You are perfect." Olivia, exhausted but happy, smiled up at her husband. "We made something pretty wonderful, did we not? The best thing I have ever been part of." They settled into parenthood with the same teamwork that had characterized their marriage. Samuel was a natural father, patient and playful with little Robert. Olivia watched them together and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known possible. When Robert was 6 months old, they finally expanded the bakery as Samuel had originally suggested. They added a small seating area where customers could enjoy coffee and pastries. It was an immediate success, giving the bakery a social aspect that people loved. Samuel built the tables and chairs himself, working in the evenings after his ranch work was done. 2 years later, they had another child, a daughter they named Rose Margaret after Olivia's mother and her dear friend. Rose was a happy baby, easier than Robert had been, and the whole town seemed to fall in love with her. Life was full and sometimes chaotic with 2 small children and a business to run. But it was also rich with meaning and connection. Olivia had never imagined feeling this complete, this satisfied with her life. She thought sometimes about the woman she had been before Samuel arrived, lonely and resigned to a small existence. That woman felt like a stranger now. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel closed the bakery early and arranged for Margaret to watch the children. He took Olivia back to Santa Barbara, to the same boarding house where they had stayed during their first trip together. "I wanted to remind you of where we started," he said as they stood on the porch watching the sunset, "as if I could forget." She leaned against him, comfortable in his embrace. "You brought me flour and ended up bringing me a whole new life. You gave me a reason to stop running. That is worth more than all the flour in California." They stood there as the sky turned purple and gold, 2 people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together. Samuel kissed the top of her head. "Happy anniversary, my love." Happy anniversary. The years continued to roll past. Robert grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with woodworking projects. Rose was more like Olivia, creative and social, always singing or drawing. In 1889, they had one more child, another boy they named James, who proved to be the wildest of the three, always climbing things and giving them heart attacks. The bakery continued to prosper, eventually employing two young women to help with the increased demand. Samuel had long since quit the ranch to work full-time building furniture, a skill he discovered he had a real talent for. His pieces were sought after throughout the county. In 1893, 10 years after Samuel first walked into her bakery, Olivia stood in the kitchen of the home they had eventually built on the edge of town, watching her 3 children play in the yard while Samuel worked in his workshop. She was 34 years old, happy in ways she had once thought impossible. Margaret came by that afternoon for tea, as she did most Thursdays. They sat on the porch and watched the children, talking about everything and nothing the way old friends do. "You know," Margaret said eventually, "I remember when you thought your life was over, when Robert died and you were so lost. I remember too, it feels like a lifetime ago. And then Samuel showed up with that flower." Olivia smiled. "He brought me so much more than flower. He brought me back to life. He is a good man. I admit I had my doubts at first, but he has proven me thoroughly wrong. He has proven a lot of people wrong." Olivia took a sip of tea, including himself. That evening, after the children were in bed, Olivia and Samuel sat on their porch swing, rocking gently in the cool air. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "I was thinking about the day we met," Olivia said. "How hopeless everything seemed. I thought my life was essentially over, just a matter of going through the motions until I died. And now I cannot imagine being happier. You and the children, the bakery, our home, all of it. It is everything I did not know I needed." Samuel pulled her closer. "I think about that day too. How close I came to just riding through Ventura without stopping. I almost did not come into the bakery at all. What made you? Honestly, I smelled the bread you had baked the day before. The scent was still in the air, and something just pulled me in. Best decision I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of the ocean. Ventura had grown over the past decade, but it still retained its small-town character. They knew everyone, and everyone knew them. It was the kind of community Olivia had once taken for granted but now cherished deeply. "You ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently?" Samuel asked. "If I had not come into the bakery that day?" "Sometimes. But then I remember that some things are just meant to be. Maybe it would have been someone else, or maybe I would have found my own way forward, but I am glad it was you." "Me too." He kissed her temple. "Me too." As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Olivia grew into middle age together, their love deepening rather than fading. They weathered difficulties, times when money was tight or when one of the children was sick, or when they argued about something neither could quite remember later. But through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense. Robert, their eldest, grew into a fine young man who ended up taking over the bakery when Olivia decided to semi-retire at 50. He had his father's steady nature and his mother's skill with bread. Rose became a teacher, beloved by her students. And James, their wild child, surprised everyone by becoming a doctor, his energy channeled into helping people. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole town threw a celebration. It was held in the church where they had married, and the turnout was enormous. People gave speeches about how Samuel and Olivia had become pillars of the community, how their love story had inspired others, how their bakery and Samuel's woodworking had contributed to Ventura's prosperity. Olivia found herself tearing up as she listened to the kind words. Samuel held her hand throughout, occasionally squeezing it when someone said something particularly touching. When it was their turn to speak, Samuel stood and pulled Olivia up with him. They faced the crowd together, these people who had become family over the decades. "I do not have fancy words," Samuel began. "I am not good at speeches, but I can tell you this. 25 years ago, I was a drifter with no roots and no real purpose. I walked into a bakery looking for bread and found everything I had been missing my entire life. Olivia did not just give me love, she gave me a home, a family, a reason to be better than I thought I could be." Olivia wiped her eyes. "And Samuel came into my life when I thought happiness was behind me. He reminded me that it is never too late to start over, to take risks, to love again. He brought sweetness to my life in every possible way." The crowd applauded, and several people were crying openly. It was a moment of pure community and connection, the kind that only happens in small towns where everyone's story is woven together. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Samuel and Olivia lay in bed talking like they had on their wedding night and countless nights since. "We have had a good life, have we not?" Olivia said. "The best life." Samuel rolled onto his side to look at her. Even after 25 years, she was still beautiful to him, perhaps more so now with the lines of laughter and living etched into her face. "I would not change a single thing. Not even the time James broke his arm jumping off the barn. Well, maybe that. My heart nearly stopped." She laughed and snuggled closer. "I love you, Samuel Tucker, more now than even when we started. I love you too, Olivia Tucker. Always have, always will." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, comfortable and content. Outside, Ventura slept peacefully under a blanket of stars, and somewhere a widow and a cowboy's story lived on, passed down through children and grandchildren as a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come when you least expect them, carried in by a stranger with kind eyes and a generous heart. The bakery still stood on Main Street, now run by Robert and his young wife. The sign above the door read Tucker's Bakery, ESD, 1883, a landmark in a town full of them. People still came from miles around for the bread and pastries, many of them remembering when Olivia herself had stood behind the counter, flour dusting her hands and a smile on her face. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, you could smell the scent of fresh bread drifting down the street, sweet and warm and full of promise, just like it had been that long-ago day when a cowboy walked in looking for something to eat and found his whole future instead. Samuel and Olivia lived to see their grandchildren grown, to celebrate their 50th anniversary surrounded by 4 generations of family. They remained in Ventura until the end, never wanting to be anywhere else. The town had given them community, and they had given the town their hearts. When Samuel passed peacefully in his sleep at 78, Olivia was there beside him, holding his hand just as he had held hers through decades of life together. She grieved, of course, but it was different from when Robert died. This time she had no regrets, no sense of things left unsaid or undone. She and Samuel had lived fully and loved completely, and that was enough. Olivia followed him 2 years later, dying quietly in her sleep in the house they had built together. Her last thoughts were of Samuel's smile and the way he had looked at her that first day in the bakery, like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. The town mourned them both, remembering the widow who had needed flour and the cowboy who had brought sweetness to her life. Their graves were side by side in the Ventura cemetery, and for years afterward, people would visit and leave flowers, touched by a love story that had become legend. But the real legacy of Samuel and Olivia Tucker was not in monuments or memories. It was in the children and grandchildren they had raised, in the business they had built, in the countless small kindnesses they had shown to neighbors and strangers alike. It was in the way they had proven that love could strike twice, that it was never too late to start over, that sometimes the best things in life came disguised as simple gestures of compassion. The bakery still operated decades later, run by their great-grandchildren, still producing the same recipes Olivia had perfected all those years ago. And sometimes, when a customer bit into a fresh cinnamon roll or a slice of still warm bread, they tasted not just flour and sugar and butter, but also the sweetness of a love story that had transformed two lives and touched countless others. In the end, that was the gift Samuel and Olivia had given each other and the world. Proof that kindness matters, that love can heal, that a single act of generosity can ripple out in ways impossible to predict. A cowboy brought flour to a widow's bakery and ended up bringing her everything that mattered. And she, in turn, gave him the home and purpose he had been searching for without even knowing it. Their story became part of Ventura's history, told and retold until it took on an almost mythic quality. Young people courting would walk past the bakery and think about Samuel and Olivia, hoping their own love would prove as enduring. Parents would point out the house Samuel built and tell their children about the importance of helping others. And bakers throughout California would reference Olivia Tucker's techniques and recipes, paying homage to a woman who had turned a small-town bakery into an institution through skill and dedication. But beyond the legend, beyond the stories and the memories, there was the simple truth of two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and chosen to build something beautiful together. A widow who needed flour for her baking, and a cowboy who brought sweetness to her life, creating a love story that would endure long after they were gone, baked into the very foundation of the town they called home.